Okay, so we're on the top of Amud Hay, and after reading a short section from the actual Maimon in Teira'ir, we're going to come to the fourth hagaha. Now, the fourth hagaha begins on the fourth line, the last word on the line, on Amud Hay, and it goes all the way till more or less the bottom of Amud Zayin. Yeah, and then there's another page or so which completes the ois. So, what we've said till now, we've made two important points about understanding the Keiches HaNefesh. And by understanding the Keiches HaNefesh, we're going to understand the Esespheres of Atzilus. The two main points we emphasized in the previous Hagah was that an inyan of a Levush HaMechuba, a Levush HaMyuchad, which are the Keiches HaNefesh, in relation to the Etzem HaNefesh, is that they are misachid with the Dova HaMislabish B'Seichem. So the Keiches HaNefesh are misachid with the Etzem HaNefesh. That is the quality of a Levush HaMyuchad. And that was the main emphasis in the previous Hagah. The other thing he mentioned, which is going to be a major emphasis in this Hagah, is that because they're misachid, or rather as a result of that, the Dova HaMislabish into this Levush HaMechuba, becomes affected by it, impacted by it. And we're going to see today what is the nature of that impact and how it works. So let's go straight. We're going to start reading from the second line down, the third word from the end, ukumoi. So we just said that whilst the levushim HaMechubarim are not the etzem, there's a clear distinction between the etzem HaNefesh and the levushei HaNefesh, the etzem HaNefesh and the keiches HaNefesh, but nevertheless they're still called tikkunim, because the nefesh is mistakenes mislabesh them. The nefesh becomes fixed and affected by being enclosed in them. So the Targum Unkelus, the Aramaic Taich, on the pasuk that a man should not wear women's clothing, the clothing of a woman. The taich in the Aramaic is le yiskan gever besikune itisa, which you could translate as a man should not fix himself with the fixtures, the fixings of a woman. So what does that mean? So, but inyan tikkun, in this context, what does it mean a tikkun? What does it mean something that fixes? Umiloshin tachshit. It's connected to the concept of a tachshit, an item of jewelry, an adornment. Shemiskashit boy umispal mimenu. When a person wears an item of jewelry, they become adorned by it, and they become affected by it. Baharim is achidim tachshit there, and the person becomes absorbed, in a sense, together with the item of jewelry, as if it is a part of their body. So here what we've got is the Maimon is pointing out that, broadly speaking, we distinguish between levushim hamyuchadim, levushim nifradim in our mashal, that the body is a mashal on the levush hamyuchad, and clothing, regular items of clothing, are levushim nifradim. Now it's bringing out that even within levushim nifradim, you can make a distinction. There are types of levushim nifradim, which were the emphasis in the previous Hagah, items of clothing whose fundamental purpose is v'darin shechutz mimenu. They have their own metzias la'atzmon. They're mailim u'mastir legamri. That's the whole function, to be mailim master on the guf, and they're not misachidim aguf. But there's also within the category of levushim, which you can take on and off. You can have a type of levush which also has similar qualities to a levush hamyuchad. And the example of that is an item of jewelry. The main reason why people wear jewelry is not to become concealed. It's not something that is affected by things outside of them. and it's not hiding them. It's to reveal an aspect of them, to reveal their beauty, or it can be their strength, or different items of adornments that ornaments that a person can wear. They bring out something in the person. To the point being that when a person wears jewelry, and even you could include in this makeup, even when a person wears these things, and a person looks at them, they don't see a distinction between the person and the jewelry. The jewelry becomes part of their whole presentation, and what they see is the beauty of the person that is elicited by that item of jewelry and that makeup. So the tachshit, these items of jewelry, have the qualities of a levush hamyuchad because they are misachid im ha'etzem, and they also are masakin the etzem. When we say the etzem over here, we're talking about the thing that is mislabish in it, the person, the body, that it brings out and it affects aspects of the body that is wearing the jewelry. So all of the qualities that we associated with the levushim hamyuchadim can also be considered in jewelry. So when it says in the pasuk Yol that it calls them tikkunin, asa tikkunin, and we have the Targum Onkelos on the pasuk lo yilbash geva simlas isha lo yiskan geva b'sikune isasa. So we can say that the esespheres of Atzilus are like tachshitim, are like items of jewelry, and that's just another dimension of what we're discussing about levushim hamyuchadim. Okay, just like in the previous hagaha, we brought the difference between there's oisius and different types of oisius and different types of ksiva. So we're bringing another nuance in it. But don't lose sight of the structure of what we're talking about. Our goal is to understand the esespheres of Atzilus. In order to understand the esespheres of Atzilus, we have to understand the Mos HaNefesh. You have to understand the Klichas HaNefesh, which are the moshel of the esespheres of Atzilus, and its relationship with the Etzem HaNefesh. In order to understand that, we have our moshel of the Guf as a Levush HaMyuchad, and items of Begodim as Levushim Nifradim, which in turn are, the Levushim Nifradim more reflect the Inyan Machshava Dibur Maisa, not the Esakech Sanefesh. So we've got a whole bunch of things going on, but if you keep everything structured, it should be fine. Okay, let's go into the hagaha. Now on to the fourth hagaha. Bekama Mekaymes Tirgim HaMetargim Al Levush Kamei HaIvri. If you look in Targum Onkelos, that many times when the pasuk will say the word associated with levush, it won't say translate into Aramaic, it will use the Hebrew. Kamei, for example, when it says in the pasuk Leisil B'Shatnez, Targum Onkelos Leisil B'Shatnez doesn't translate the silbash. The wearing, he borrows exactly. So wearing and levush, he doesn't make any sort of translation and therefore interpretation. For Khan, whereas over here in our example, in this pasuk, Tirgim lo yiskan geva b'sikuni isisa, he dafka takes the word yilbash and doesn't say like he does in lo yilbash silbash satnis. He translates it as lo yiskan. Specifically because the meaning of this pasuk is specifically about wearing jewelry. So when you're talking about wearing jewelry, the correct term would be you don't wear jewelry, le yilbash jewelry, le yiskan. You don't become adorned, don't become fixed, affected, enhanced by the jewelry of a woman. I'm Begemara Nazir, Dafnun Tesam with Aleph. If you look in the Gemara Nazir, it has all different opinions about what the taich of this pasuk is, and one of the opinions over there is that the pasuk means tachshitin. But tachshit hu tikkun b'lashon targim, and tachshit that we have is jewelry is the word tikkun in Aramaic. Skip again to the 2 lines later. So we find therefore that even in levushim, in begodim, gashmiim, there are 2 classes and categories of clothing. Levush hanifrad, levush mechuba, where sometimes the levushim act as nifradim, where they're mailam or master on the thing that wears them, and you also have levushim mechubarim, levushim which misachid, become intertwined and indistinguishable from the wearer of that clothing. All ordinary items of clothing are designated as levushim nifradim. Because the person does not become attached to them in such a way where he's indistinguishable from them. Which is not the case when it comes to jewelry, where a person becomes identified with that thing. Because the nefesh, the wearer of the jewelry, is affected by them and becomes enhanced and adorned by them. And that's why it's called a tikkun in Aramaic, because it is a sort of a tikkun for the nefesh. So it's something that affects and changes and impacts the nefesh, unlike a regular item of clothing. Okay, so what is the meaning of all this? I'm going to explain this a bit more. Just to explain this concept, and if you look, what does it say in the 69? It gives you to the Hemshachayim base, which I told you to learn. Yeah? Tikkunim, Tikkunim, when we say tikkunim, asar tikkunim, in the Pasach Eliyol,
it's written before it, though. Right?
Yeah.
Just a reference. So this is the source, kind of what it says later.
Yeah. So the tikkunim of the Esses, which we call the Esses First Artilis tikkunim, is also miloshen tikkun shemasakin ezadavim. That this is the Esses First are actually impacting something. They're affecting something. They're changing something. And that is why we call the kelim of Atzilis tikkunim, because they fix the oir. They impact the oir, like we're going to explain soon as part of this. V'hu b'keiches hanefesh. And this is also found, I think that's I'm not sure exactly the language of V'hu b'keiches hanefesh, and so too it's also in the keiches hanefesh. The keiches hanefesh are masakin the etzem hanefesh. It could be that when it says that first is saying in reference to keiches hanefesh, but I don't know why you would call it kelim. So the esferis atzilus are being impacting and affecting the oir. And this, in a sense, is an indication of their attachment and manner in which they're absorbed with the oir. That because they're bis achtus, therefore they have an impact. Once you have something which is mislabish entirely in something else, to the point where they are indistinguishable, then inevitably they're going to have an impact on each other. And the explanation is as follows. We see this in a person, in a human being. How a person's aspects of their personality, their seichel, their middos, the way it is enclosed in the limbs of the body. For example, a person has a capacity in his nefesh to see. It's called the koyach hariyah. The koyach hariyah manifests itself in the physical eye. And the soulful capacity for intellect, the soul is able to comprehend ideas and even generate ideas, that manifests itself in the physical brain in the head. Now, I'm going to use the example of eyesight. It's specifically through the actual physical eye that mistaking koyach hariyah, that the koyach hariyah of the nefesh is fixed, so to speak. is impacted, liros, that it's able to see. The koyach hariyah shabanefesh can't see anything until it's mislabish in the ayin agashmi. For sure, the nefesh has, as part of it, a koyach hariyah, but it's a koyach hariyah ruchnis. Gam terem shim slabshe b'kli ayin, and it's there prior to its enclothement in the physical eye. V'sham hu b'mayla el yoyna har b'yosin. You could say that the soulful quality of sight is in a much more sublime state prior to its enclothement in the body. V'kamoshin is lavish b'kli ayin, than when it actually ends up coming enclosed in the body. Shen nistamtzin koyach re'iyah ruchnis l'fi erech kli ayin. For the koyach re'iyah, the nefesh, to be able to be manifest in the physical eye, it has to be a tzimtzum. Has to become suited to be able to have that type of integration. But whilst it was prior to its enclosement in the body, the way it was in the etzem nefesh, then it was overwhelmed by the intensity of the etzem nefesh, and it wasn't in a state where it could plausibly manifest as human eyesight. But mikol mokim, notwithstanding the fact that in its origin, you could say it was in a much more sublime state, and this is an inferior state of being for it to become enclosed in the body. Mikol mokim, etzem koyach hariyah terem shenis lavish b'kli ayin, einei poyel pu'ulas hariyah liris tovagashmi. The fact of the matter is, prior to its enclosement in the body, and specifically the koyach hariyah's enclosement in the physical eye, it wasn't able to see physical things. It was only once it had gone through a process of tzimtzum, of helam v'hester, such that it was able to be mislabish in the physical eye, it could then see physical things. So without the kli ha'ayin, the nefesh would not be able to see physical things. So the kli ha'ayin has impacted and affected the nefesh. And that's why it's called a tikkun. It's a tikkun for the nefesh.
Can you translate tikkun as completion? Does that not work?
No, it's more about affecting it and impacting it and improving it.
Was it lacking something? Was it just an improvement?
Yes, it was lacking the ability to see physical things. It was a koyach, which was chasa, it's poyel. It was a potential for sight. But as long as it wasn't enclosed in the physical eye, it wasn't able to see things. And similarly with all the other keiches, like for example, the keich haseichel, the person's intellectual sphere, consciousness. That for sure the nefesh has intellectual abilities prior to its descent into a body, but in a much more sublime and supreme way. But the nefesh will not actually engage in intellectual activities in the etzem nefesh. There in the etzem nefesh, it's not misasik in haskalas, because the etzem is poshut, and the etzem is not busy with seichel. It's only once the Eiris goes through a tzimtzum and is able to mislabish in the body that then, through the physical brain, there is the activity of being engaged in intellectual pursuits. And the same is with each and every one of the other aspects of a person's soul, a person's personality. V'nimtza. So what can we conclude from all of this? The etzem hakoyach terem mislabshusei shesham hu begilu eirav hayu helem she'enei poyel pu'ulasei ha'atzmis. A koyach, prior to its hislabshus in a kli, so the oir, we can use more general terms, an oir before it's mislabish in a kli, the oir is for sure much more intense. The act of being mislabish is an act of tzimtzum, of fitting in and containing oneself into a keli. But that gilui, that state of gilui that the oir has before it comes into a kli, is in fact a helem in some sense. Because it's not actually getting done what it needs to do. It's all very well being a sublime and an extraordinary koyach hariyah, but mazet nicht. You don't see anything. So you're like the idea, the sort of, some people might think the abstraction and the way something is in its idea is a much more profound state. But in a sense, it's a helem, it's missing something. It's a koyach which is chasa, it's poya. And when you go through the process of a tzimtzum, where the intensity is restrained, umislabish b'kliya ayin, becoming clothed in the various kelim, be it the kliya ayin or kliya moyach, whatever aspect, whichever part of the body which is the kelim for that particular koyach, os poya polosi begili. It's then that it can actually be effective and impactful. Imkain. So if so, hadin istakin koyach hariyah ayidis lapshus shinslabish b'kliya ayin b'mashi yochel lifo pu'ula ha'pu'ula begili mamish masha enkin koydim lachin chuli. So this is our v'nimtza. So what do we see? That the koyach hariyah is affecting the kli ha'ayin is affecting the koyach hariyah by coming in clothed in it. Which was not the case beforehand. It wasn't able to be effective. It couldn't see things. That's why we call this act of hislapshus, the hislapshus of the koyach hanefesh into the Avery Haguf, which we said the Avery Haguf are levushim yuchadin. What they're doing is, in this act of hislapshus, is an act of tikkun. Ka'odam shemasakin dova, which is, why using the term tikkun? Because the term tikkun is ka'odam shemasakin dova, a person who fixes something. K'moishula toyelis, such that it can then be useful. You have a machine that's broken, comes along a person, they're masakin they're masakin it. And by being masakin it, it can work. What does it mean to fix something? You fix something in order it can work. That is what we mean when we say tikkun. We call it tikkunim. We take things which are, in a sense, inert, inanimate, impotent, ineffective. All of these koiches, which are chasa poya, and through the hislapshus in the guf, they become nistakin. There's a tikkun in that koyach, because now it's a koyach which is able to be poya, which is the kavonas hakoyach. The whole kavon of the nefesh having the koyach hariyah is not that it should have the concept of koyach hariyah, the potential for riyah, but rather it should actually see things. Why should it have koyach haseichel? So it should be masculine scholars. Not that it should have the potential for it. So kain halavush. So just like in the example of the machine it just gave, or any not machine necessarily, any tool which is fixed by a person, in order that it should be functional and be able to have an impact, and not just an impact on a doba hazulas, on something external to itself. So too the levush, whatever we're going to, this levush hamayuchad is able to impact the oir, so it can be effective. This is all because why? It's the levush hamechuba. It all comes back to the fact, because it's mechuba and it's mischabim oir, it becomes indistinguishable from the oir. It has this impact. The oir which comes into this kli, into this levush, is mislabish. When we say mislabshus, slabshus is, even though it's an oir chitzoni, even though it's an oir mitzumtzum, it's still, whatever that is, it's entirely melubish in it. It can't be half enclosed. If you're in, you're in. That's the relationship. The kli is, in a sense, the mamutza, the the means by which the thing can now become mechuba to its activity. So the koyach hariyah needs to see things. What does it need to see? It needs to see physical things. How does it see physical things? Well, it's mechuba with the ayin agashmi, and the ayin agashmi is able to be mechaber this oir hariyah with the davar gashmi. Without the human brain, without the human eye, nefesh would not be able to see any physical things, and the nefesh would not be able to be maskul any haskalas in dvarim gashmim. So nimtza, what can we conclude from all of this? Shakli poyel gilu ha'oir. The function of the kli is not to be. Remember we said levushim nifradim or mailim umastim. What levushim hamyuchadim, their whole inyan is to be poyel gilu ha'oir. Not to be it's not mailim umastim on the nefesh. It's megala the nefesh. It's megala the keich hariyah shebenefesh, the keich haseichel shebenefesh. She's so nimsa shakli poyel gilu ha'oir. She's chabim dova hazulas v'zeu tikkun ha'oir chuli kanal. What calls that mipnei shakli misached umischaber im ha'oir, and it's all because of this his achdus of the oir with the kli, with the oir the levush. Okay, so now's a good point to remember the Rebbe's Maimah of Anocha Toshni Yudalit, where the Rebbe asks the question, what is the fundamental reason for this? What is the fundamental reason? You say it's because it's here the emphasis is it's misachid, but the Rebbe goes a step deeper and asks what is going on over here. The main difference in the levush hamiyuchad and the levush hanifrad is the levush hanifrad is an inyan la'atzmei, has yeshus, where levush hamiyuchad has no yeshus. It's complete bittul. Because of its bittul, it's not mailim u'mastir, it's megala. So when a person, when you look at a person, you don't see their goof, you see their personality. The goof is not mailim u'mastir on the self, it's megala the self. Anyway, it's worth looking, after we've read all this now, go back to the Maimah V'nochi Daled. Just see how the Rebbe spells it out. And here he doesn't make that step. That's the Rebbe. I mean, the Rebbe brings the Raya from the Ayin Beis. The Rebbe is referring to the Ayin Beis the whole way through, and in the footnotes tries to show how this Nakuda he's making is in the Ayin Beis. But even in the Ayin Beis, it doesn't jump out of you in the way that the Rebbe spells it out in Oisius Bruris. What he's trying to say, it's in the Ayin Beis, but it's not as it's how the Rebbe learns the Ayin Beis. So it's very geschmack, especially the two ha'aras there. Now we have a bracket here, which I'm going to skip. We're up to Ukumoishn Isboile Il, which is what? The 3, 6, 9, 10 lines down. 2 words in from the end. Ukumoishn Isboile. Like we explained above, the Kliva Avery Haguf Nikroin Tikunim Shemasaknim Keichas HaNefesh Lipul Pu'ulasam. So we're talking all here now the relationship between the Guf and the Keichas HaNefesh. So the Guf is the Levush HaMyuchad and the Keichas HaNefesh are the Etzem in that relationship. So K'moi Kein Yuvim B'Keichas HaNefesh Seichel U'Midois Shen Kelim B'Tikunim LeEtzem HaNefesh. Now we're moving up in the mashal, in the relationship between the etzem hanefesh and the keiches hanefesh. Similarly, the keiches hanefesh are levushim yuchadim of the etzem hanefesh. Obviously, it's harder for us to now comprehend these things. So we're talking now in dvarim ruchniim. It's easier to have the mashal of the guf because it's much closer to our understanding. But now we're moving it up. That these keiches hanefesh have an impact on the etzem hanefesh. Ki hanefesh mitzad atzmai harihu etzem poshut umushnu mibechinas gilui upu'ula bedava hazulas. As we said right at the beginning, etzem hanefesh is an etzem poshut. And what's it mean by something being an etzem pashut? An etzem pashut meaning it's an atzmi. Which means kol inyanei is its relationship with itself. Doesn't have for it to have a relationship with the zulas is already a harkava. Takes away from its pshitas. It adds a dimension to itself. There's itself and its relationship to other things. Kol zman, it has a relationship with other things. It's not pashut. Because there's at least two things. There's itself and the thing it has a relationship with. An etzem pashut, which is mushlo, is completely out of the question for there to be any relationship with anything else. That's the nature of the etzem. So it's kim al yidei hakelim shaloi. It's through its kelim. Shehein hakeiches hanefesh. These levushim hamyuchadim the keiches hanefesh. Harihu miskale upoil. The etzem hanefesh becomes active. For all intents and purposes, the etzem hanefesh, in relation to a zulas, is irrelevant. And it's only through the keiches that the etzem becomes relevant and effective. By sheyifo pu'ulosei al yidei hagarzim she'hagarzim hu kli shal yodli miskale koyach hapoyal u'mischabe im ha'pu'ula. So it's by way of an example of what? Of the axe in the hand of the wood chopper. That it's merely a tool, right? The axe is merely a tool. The tree is not knocked down by an axe. The tree is knocked down by the wood chopper. But in order for the wood chopper's koyach hapoya to be niskala and to be mischabe mapu'ula, as it describes, you need to have the axe. So the keiches hanefesh are merely tools of the etzem hanefesh, but it's dafka through those tools where the etzem hanefesh can actually have an impact. So the keiches hanefesh are tools of the nefesh that enables the nefesh to engage with the activity of the various different activities of the nefesh. For example, for the nefesh to be able to intellectualize with their koyach hachachma. Let's say, what are they going to think about? Let's say they're studying they want to understand medicine or kudaima. They want to understand medicine, or whatever, in any type of chachma. Al yidei hakoyach hasichli shakoyach hazeh hu kli shal yodei tifel hanefesh bulasa. So a person has a koyach hasichel, chachma, koyach habina, koyach hadas. These are his kelim, and the nefesh can understand medicine through these koyches. Or k'mei hamidis. And the same is true not just for the intellect, but also the emotional qualities, the emotional aspects of a person's personality. In order for the nefesh to be able to love anything, how can the nefesh love anything? The nefesh is an atzmi. It doesn't have any context of knowing anything other than itself. It's poshut. So in order for the nefesh to have ava, to love something else, and be drawn to it, they have to use the kliya ava. And the same with all the keiches. So what do we conclude from all of this? That the various components of the keiches hanefesh, they act and they serve as tools of the nefesh. And through being tools, they affect and fix and impact the nefesh. That it should be a gilui of the nefesh and enable the nefesh to engage in various different activities.
Nefesh is chassid then, right?
Yeah, it's chassid at that point.
Because it's chasarin is chassid peh. So every.
It's a bit different this way because in the etzem you wouldn't say it even has a koyach because it's poshut. So we're going to discuss that a bit more. Hold that thought, because that you can't just go from Avery Aguf to Avery Nefesh and expect everything to just move naturally across, because the Keichel and Nefesh are not pshutim. They're only pshutim if you erech the Avery Aguf, but the Etzma Nefesh is a Etzem Pashut. So we have to figure that out. And why do the Keiches HaNefesh have this ability to be Masak in the Nefesh? It's because they are Levushim Uchubarim, and they are indivisible from the Nefesh itself. Now, if we got our two examples, the relationship between the Avery Aguf and the Keiches HaNefesh, and the relationship of the Avery HaNefesh with Etzem HaNefesh. It's saying now that in fact the Achdus and the intertwinedness of the Avery HaNefesh with the Etzem HaNefesh is even greater than the intertwinedness of the Avery Aguf with the Avery HaNefesh. But we're not going to dwell on that at the moment. The main point we want to understand is they are only Kelim HaNefesh. However miyuchad they are with the Nefesh, don't mistake your personality for your actual self. You are not your personality. You have an etzem, which is poshut, and is mushlu from all these tziyurim. But you have kelim, and the kelim are tools in which the etzem can also have. Etzem also has koiches, also has kelim. But that's not what it is. So they're only kelim the nefesh, umikomokim hen kelim yuchadim muchubarim nefesh u'poilim gilu eira nefesh. Okay, so we have on one hand they're be'ein areich. They're not one and the same thing. Now, but still they are miyuchad, that they are seemingly the same thing, because they're indivisible from each other. And not only that, it has an impact on the etzem that it causes it to be, enables it to be able to be active. And that's why we call them tikkunim. We don't just call them a levush, just like you think about regular begotten levush and nifradim. The levush usually is nifrad and is mailim al ha'oir. Masha enkin tikkunim meir al levush ha'mechuba kamei tachshit shu levush ha'mechuba shaya nefesh misnayim miskashit bay. Because by saying tikkunim, you're making it clear what type of levush are we talking about. Not just any old levush, not an ordinary levush, which is mailim u'master, but rather levush ha'mechuba, like a item of jewelry, where the person is not hidden by it, but adrabah, a person is enhanced by it, and is adorned by it, and is able to be niskala through it. And we're intimating the idea the way the nefesh can be nisbah and responds to this levush, because it's, by becoming muyuchad with it, it becomes affected by it and enhanced by it. So that's in the moshel of the tachshit. As we know, a person's image can be considerably enhanced, or it's a matter of taste how it's enhanced, but it's definitely affected by the jewelry. So so too a person's intellect and emotions are called tikkunim, they're called jewelry. By way of example, shem kelim hamisachtim nefesh, because they become so attached to the nefesh. They are the types of kelim which are entirely attached to the nefesh, and they affect the nefesh, and they enable the nefesh to be effective, and that is a tikkun for the nefesh, because it now becomes be able to be poyel pu'ulase, which is the key. It's a key function. What the kavanah in the grand scheme of things is. Okay. No. Let's see how long we. Yeah, let's keep going. So v'anim shul mikol zeh yuvan l'mayla. Let's go to the end of the hagah. V'anim shul mikol. What do you want to stop here? Okay, let's stop here. We'll stop here in the middle of the hagah, and then the next year we'll finish the hagah, and then we'll finish the ayis as well. Okay, it's not a bad idea. Okay, so we'll stop here, and then we'll continue the next year from v'anim shul mikol zeh.